Everyone who considers Christianity brings heartfelt questions and intellectual objections born out of real-life experiences. They're looking for answers, but even more, they're looking for a safe place to ask their questions. Join me as I meet with a group of people who don't believe in the Christian faith to discuss 6 of the most common objections to Christianity. Welcome to The Reason for God. Welcome back, and welcome to James and Liz. This is our second discussion together on the reason for God, and our topic tonight is, how can you say there is only one way to God? What about all the other religions? Just to set this up briefly, religious pluralism is very plausible in our Western cultures because today we have a world in which mobility and technology makes it possible to have multicultural cities, multicultural societies. And so I think what we're talking about tonight is what I'll call the religious pluralism objection to Christianity. And the religious pluralism objection goes something like this. We now know how many different ways there are to try to find God, so many different faiths. Christianity is just one among many, and therefore you shouldn't try to convert everybody or insist that your way is better than everybody else's. Or, alternatively, the objection goes like this: there can't just be one true religion. There just can't be. So, do you feel that way? Take it away.
I agree with that, but at the same time, I do feel like different religions are a bit mutually exclusive just by what value, I guess mostly the claims that they make. So really, when I think about it that way, they just two cannot be right. Perhaps there's different, I don't disagree that there is probably different paths or different ways to get to this point, but I personally just see it as a mutually exclusive thing.
And as a deconstructionist of history, I understand why a religion would want to say it's the only way to God as well. So it makes sense for me that certain religions are more pervasive in terms of people following it than others, and I think there's a correlation between within their policy, I guess, that they are the only one and there are no others. So
I think it highly unlikely that there is a single path to God. I think it's highly unlikely that Christianity is alone. I also think it's probably incompatible with other teachings of Christianity. More recently, I lived most of my adult life in Asia and in countries which were not Christian nations. So you're confronted on a daily basis with this issue. And I do notice that religions in general have a side which is definitely doctrine, dogma, and the stories that make them up. And those are conflicting, and they are very important because they enable a religion to be taught from one generation to the next. But the other side, everything, the charismatic side of prayer and worship, the religious experience, and the experience, behavior, and practice are very similar between them. And it makes you think, maybe, why do we say that there is only one path to God?
you know, maybe this is a bit radical, but I think folks who really in earnest pursue God, or, you know, I think the experience they're having is the same, but we're in this battle to own the symbols of what that means. You know, the words. Is it God? Is it Allah? Is it Christian? Is it? Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's where the tension starts getting created. I mean, it's a sort of semantical issue for me, in my opinion. And that's a sad thing, because I think we're actually sharing a common, amazing experience, but we want to say, oh, but it's this God, and that God is different than yours, so therefore yours is not credible. I don't know why we have to sort of say mine is better or yours isn't.
I got a response, I think. In fact, C.S. Lewis wrote a book called The Abolition of Man, and he has an appendix in which he takes all the different religions on. He essentially takes the Ten Commandments and shows that all the different religions say roughly the same things about how to live. Where they really differ, Christianity I know differs from the others, and Buddhism and Islam and Hinduism, is they differ on how you're saved. That means what is the process by which you can know that your relationship with God is the way it should be. because with Buddhism, it is very mystical. With Christianity, it's not what you do, but it's admitting you're a sinner. Christian experience always comes from saying, sin means self-centeredness, and my self-centeredness cuts me off from God. And so the Christian experience actually means I feel cut off from God and I need something to bridge the gap. In other religions, that's not the way the experience goes at all. So I'd actually say that it's the way of salvation differs and the ethics is the same, in which case we do have something to debate, because we have to say, is the Christian pathway to salvation the right one or not?
When I hear someone say there's only one way to God, it makes me feel sorry for them because they don't have an open mind. And I think when you don't have an open mind, you miss out on maybe what could be something really informational and good for you to learn about.
Isn't it a little bit unfair of God to reveal himself to some and not to others?
I think that's one of my biggest issues.
Okay.
Because if you're saying that there's only one path, then, I don't know, my sense of fairness, it should be open to everyone. But
Right.
clearly it isn't.
Because a lot of people have never even
Right.
had a decent chance to hear it.
And are never going to.
Right.
And so, I don't know. I guess my point is, how do you reconcile that? Where is the justice in that? And how am I supposed to comprehend it?
The fact that the Bible gives us what we need to live our lives, it doesn't tell us everything we might want to know. I mean, there's a place in Deuteronomy, believe it or not, in the Old Testament, where it says, what God has revealed, he's revealed so that you can live as you should, but he doesn't tell you everything. It's a verse that says, the secret things God has kept to himself, but what he's revealed so you can live. As a Christian, I know that I offer Jesus as the way. And the reason is, every other religion essentially says, here's how you find God. It's through mystical experience or through various sorts of things that you do. And Christianity says salvation's a gift. It's a free gift. It's not something you earn or you deserve. It comes because Jesus has secured it in what he's done. As a Christian, I go out and I offer that. And then you say, what about the people who never really have a decent chance to hear that? And the answer is, I'm not told about them. I mean, I've heard all sorts of theories of how God could still offer Jesus as the way and still be fair. Let me give you one, and I don't believe it, but let me just give it to you for a second. The theory is God would not have somebody born on a mountain in Tibet in the 13th century who would have responded to a Christian offer if they were born in Indianapolis in the 20th century. So what God is doing is he's working everything out so that anybody who would respond gets a chance, and anybody who wouldn't anyway doesn't get the chance. And I've never actually felt that it's that simple, because my belief is that God is just beyond me, and therefore I only give that example if people under duress, like now. Just to say, look, maybe that's, even though I don't think that it can be as simple as that, that shows me that there might be a way. For Jesus to be offered is the only way, and at the same time, there be some method by which God is still being just and merciful. I just don't know what it is.
For me, the idea that there's only one way to God is confusing. I can see both sides of the argument. Specifically, pluralism sounds like a good thing in that it promotes peace and promotes tolerance. However, logically, it makes sense to me that some religions exclude other religions.
Could I ask a question about the divisiveness of religion in the world? It hasn't come up yet. I just thought I'd get there. Religion's not going away. If anything, it's getting stronger in many places. And yet religion's the cause of a tremendous amount of conflict, war, divisiveness. It would be interesting as a group to work on what do we do about that. I think 30 years ago, when I was a young man, there was an awful lot of people who said religion was going to die away. Things would get more and more secular as modernity and technology advanced. And I don't think people are saying that anymore. So what do we do about the divisiveness of religion?
I'm trying to interface with the prompt a little bit, but I'm having a problem because I think stipulated within it is that religion is a problem and it's divisive, and what would the world be like if we didn't have this? I don't know, has there been a time on the earth where there wasn't religion? And what would it look like if religion were absent? Would it necessarily be a better place? Would it be a less divisive place? I don't know. I think there's actually a lot of benefits that religion has brought into this world, and there are a lot of negative things. And maybe in modern times, its effect has been amplified as a result of technology, as a result of sort of larger populations, larger ability for us to destroy or hurt each other. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm willing to immediately say religion is the problem or the evil. Okay. It's unclear to me still.
Eddie, I would even say, I'm sorry. I would even say that all the negative aspects of religion are usually tied to the extremists, people who take it more literal and more literal. Mm-hmm. So if the story still existed, but people didn't exactly, or I guess, believe in all of the, I guess, stories within all, like whether Jesus was God, if they didn't believe in that, then you could argue that a lot of the problems would be gone, I think.
This is where it gets a little bit tricky, because I think it does come from being able to understand other people's faiths and being able to step into their shoes.
I think problems arise whenever one group believes it has the exclusive sort of domain on truth, or the exclusive hold on truth. I think when you believe that you have the firm hold on truth, it leads to extreme behaviors at the detriment of others who may not believe what you do. It leads to intolerance.
I believe that there have been cultural wars in India specifically over religion. I did a social studies project on this in 8th grade, and I enjoyed learning about my culture in that way. I've done research in my culture because I'm curious about it. Aside from that, being Indian American has caused me to visit India and realize that it's treated very differently there than it is here. I think here it's more okay to have questions, and I think people who engage in debate/dialogue with priests there are seen as rebellious and even a little crazy.
Stephen Carter, who teaches law at Yale, has written a whole slew of books that essentially says the same thing. He says essentially everybody is bringing religious values into the public square, because all values essentially are based on a view of human flourishing, right and wrong, what people need in order to flourish and do well. And it's never science. It's never based on some kind of empirical scientific fact. Never. It's always based on, for example, if you're more individualistic, you feel like people need to have the freedom to decide what is right or wrong for him or her. Carter would say that's essentially a religious idea. It's because plenty of other countries, plenty of other cultures, that idea is crazy. It's just looked at as crazy. That's not what human beings need. And so he was saying that it's impossible. On the one hand, you could say every religious believer comes in and has to follow their values. But he says, well, everybody's doing that. Absolutely everyone, including the most liberal secular person, is bringing a view of human flourishing not based on empirical science, but based on a view of human nature and life. And so may the best person win. Go to it. And instead of saying, yeah, there's a problem with religious people bringing their values into the public square, he says, well, everybody's doing it anyway, so just let it go.
So if I'm understanding Stephen Carter correctly, he's essentially saying that everyone is exclusive in his or her religious beliefs.
Yes, I do think he's saying that. Do any of the rest of you see that or agree with that?
I definitely agree, and I think it's a valid statement too. I think everyone has a view of the world, and it's impossible to separate that view of how things should be and what you believe politically.
Yes, but you have to be able to compromise. And this is what Brian talked about. It's the package that's the problem. If you cannot vote against your own ideas sometimes, if you cannot say, I'll go against that, then that's a problem.
The highest ideal or value for me is the search for truth and the search for the rigor of the journey. And implicit in that is whatever you believe or say you need to be willing to abandon it at any moment. And that's the only way you can really have a really strong idea. If you're unwilling to put out to public scrutiny, then there's something you're afraid of, I would think.
And I guess my biggest fear is that, if you spend, like I said, at this point in my life, I'm not Christian, but if you spend your whole time trying to understand other people's relationships with God, do you miss out on having one yourself?
You need a home.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's, I guess, the initial question then, how do you pick your fundamental, your home? Is it, the way you were raised, or is it your own research kind of? I grew up Presbyterian. My dad was Presbyterian. And then I got engaged to somebody who was Roman Catholic. So obviously, meeting him and loving him and valuing him for an extremely intelligent person, it made me question my faith. It made me think that if he's so smart and he knows the truth, how do I know that he's not right? How do you know that that's not the truth? So then I went on to explore Catholicism for a while.
I think I've always believed that only one religion can be true. I guess the bigger question for me is whether one of the religions is true, or if they're all false.
I think it's time to wrap up, and I'd like to wrap up with this closing observation. Actually, it's an appeal to you to be understanding of us Christians when we say Jesus is the way to God. I know that sounds pretty intolerant, but I want you to be more sympathetic, and here's why. Here's a man, Jesus Christ, in the Gospels, the Bible. He forgives all sins. He says, all sins are against me, so I forgive you. He says he's going to come back at the end of time to judge the world. He says, before Abraham was, I am. He claims to have been eternal. So he makes all these absolutely crazy claims. And the founders of the other religions always said, I am a prophet or a sage here to point the way to God. And Jesus actually comes and says, no, I'm God. I'm God, come to find you. And so Christians are actually in this position where if we believe what he said, then we have to believe it's a superior way to go. These are claims that the other religions don't make, or the founders don't make. If we don't think he is who he says he is, and then we say, well, then it's an inferior way, but we can't just sit there and say this is one nice way along with the others. It's impossible by the nature of the claims. And I'm not kidding when I say please be sympathetic, because we live in a pluralistic society where the idea that Jesus is the way looks very intolerant. But from inside, when you actually look at him, and if you get convinced by what he said, it's a position we have to go to. We don't go there because we just like to be right. We go there because we're just trying to be true to the one that impresses us so much as being who he said he was. You've done a great job tonight. Thank you so much for coming, and I'm looking forward to the next time we can gather and have another conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.